Hey there, safe crackers. Get your combinations ready because it is time for the Comic Vault! A vault full of comics. For everybody. Anyway, today on the Comic Vault, we have a couple issues for you. From Punisher War Journal, issues 12 and 13. 2 issues in the same Comic Vault. Aren't you guys lucky? Anyway, so they were sent to us from... I'm only presuming that it's Z Do Guess. Sorry if I still have your name wrong. But these issues I really quite enjoyed. He happened to pick 2 issues that I thought were really interesting out of the Punisher War Journal. Now, there are varying flaws or things that I think are a little contrived that maybe are commonalities among comics in general. Maybe it's just something that's hard to escape. I will say that Carl Potts, the writer of these 2 comics, I believe it's Carl Potts. Yep. Carl Potts and Jim Lee, it's a heck of a team. Jim Lee, yes, for those of you who are saying, Jim Lee did the Punisher? Yes, he did, and it is beautiful. Very pretty Punisher artwork, very pretty. Then again, everything Jim Lee does is really very pretty. Not everything Jim Lee writes is very pretty, but everything Jim Lee draws is very pretty. So, these 2 issues, which are connected to the larger series via little plot lines that tend to weave into it, and things outside of the Punisher get connected into it. It's, after all, it is a massive giant continuity that Marvel tends to have. So there is it's bookended by these 2 ideas where well, it's sort of bookended. It's early on and then the very end. So it's Dr. Doom talking to the Kingpin about a little wager that they made and who is capable of taking out the Punisher. Kingpin or Dr. Doom kind of looks down on the Kingpin as just a lowly criminal, and the Kingpin looks at Dr. Doom and says, "You're no better than me." And they make a little wager, see who can kill the Punisher, and the Kingpin, well, not the Kingpin, Dr. Doom doesn't get his, or decides not to kill him for varying reasons that come to light in the previous issues and in this little 2-issue series. Well, 2-issue series. It's 12 and 13, but it's a little 2-issue story arc. But this is where the Dr. Doom and Kingpin thing, I feel, is largely resolved in what their characterizations and how they relate to each other. I feel it's a little contrived that they're even speaking to each other, considering that Kingpin, granted, yeah, he's an international man of business, and he's also an international crime lord, sure. But I still don't believe that the Latvian dictator would really just talk to this guy about business. I mean, I feel like they're in the same room because they're 2 major Marvel villains, and they are expected to talk to each other at some point because they're 2 major Marvel villains. Like, for example, of course Wolverine and Captain America have to talk to each other at some point. They're in the same continuity, and they're 2 major Marvel heroes. That's not good enough. That doesn't make any sense, why these 2 people would really be one-on-one in each other's homes, speaking with each other. That's really bizarre. So, in fact, when I first saw Dr. Doom pop up in the series, I thought, what? Why? Why is Dr. Doom in the Punisher? There is nothing. Dr. Doom would destroy the Punisher. And, in fact, Dr. Doom maintains that he could have, but decided not to for strategic means of some kind. But, so the wager carries on where Dr. Doom says, I didn't need to win the wager. I don't need to prove anything to you. So why are you still talking to the Kingpin? I think Dr. Doom is talking to the Kingpin to say, and I know this is a minor details within the book, it's not the whole thing, but Dr. Doom says to the Kingpin, I don't need to prove to myself I don't need to prove to you that I'm worthy, I want to prove to you that you're not. So the Kingpin does, hatches this idea to where he's going to goad Bushwhacker into hunting the Punisher for him. Of course, he also pays him, so it's not like he just out of the blue says, you're going to hunt this guy for me. Yeah, I'm going to hunt him for you. But, so Bushwhacker, the hunter of Morlocks, and tradition, or not of Morlocks, by Morlocks. Whatever. he's hunting what are traditionally evil mutants, but he starts out at the beginning of the book hunting a mutant that there's no precedent set for that person to really be evil. It looks to be that they're an artist, and the Bushwhacker says that it's not fair for that person. Art is about truth, and it is not fair for a person who has a genetic mutation at art to use that to get at truth. You should not have an advantage in displaying truth. That is really strange. You would think that somebody would say, no, maybe what he's saying is that art is more about struggle, and that there is more of an ecstatic truth to get out there, as per that Werner Herzog idea, that imperfection is what gets at truth more than what adequate or more perfectly saying exactly what you mean to say. So that's kind of strange to me. I feel like it's an interesting flaw for him to have, that he's so obsessed with this idea of the humanities and artwork, and that he sort of loses sight about what's important. I kind of like that idea. It makes me like him quite a lot less than what I might. And he has a lot of little monologues throughout these two books, or at least inner monologues, where he's thinking to himself about what is art and how what he does is art. Now, Bushwhacker is a character who has guns essentially built into his body. He can turn his finger into a gun, he can turn his arm into a gun. It's interesting, hard to believe, but interesting. I'm okay with it. I really don't care. I like the power. I think it's kind of fun. I think it's hilarious that when he turns his hand into this big, like, quad barrel cannon, that he has a little hand. he has a little. It's so funny to me. Now maybe that's supposed to be the clip, but it has the butt to the gun, and then it has the handle to the gun, and I just think that's so funny. Maybe this is supposed to be a clip or something, but it cracks me up. Anyway, so he has this idea that being an assassin can be artistic, and not just can be artistic, but that he himself is an artist, and that to kill people in a certain way is to engage in artistry. And I think it's slightly ill-defined. That's part of the problem with it. I like the idea that there's an assassin that thinks he's an artist. I'm cool with that. In fact, I kind of wish during the '89 Batman movie that they would have explored that a little bit. I'm the world's first homicidal artist. Why not? So here's a guy who is a homicidal artist. Now, I believe '89. This came out in December '89, so coincidence? But it's such a contrivance to me. I have an issue with him never explaining what about it is artistic. It's just the assumption that being an assassin is artistic. I love what he says to the artist that he kills at the beginning of issue 12, where he says, "I'm going to merge you with your art." So he's saying to her that you should thank me because you are going to become art yourself. And I find that really interesting, but it drives me nuts that we never really get an explanation of what about killing is artistic. And later on in the book, toward the end of this issue, maybe it spoils issue 12 for you, so I apologize, but at the end of this issue, he goes forth and he hunts down the Punisher. He beats the Punisher within an inch of his life, but decides not to kill him because it's not the artistic way to do it. In his mind, he needs an audience in order to kill the Punisher, in order for it to be artistic. The Punisher needs to confess in order to confess to his sins, because both of these characters, the Punisher and Bushwhacker, have spent time in the seminary. I feel it's really interesting that why they left the seminary, but hopefully I can remember to come back to that. So the Punisher has to confess his sins to Bushwhacker, which doesn't make a lot of sense. He doesn't require anybody else to confess their sins. He just makes a statement of their guilt of whatever it is and then killed them, or at least that's what he did for the artist at the beginning of the issue. And then he goes home and he watches what they call CMN, which is obviously supposed to be CNN. But it kind of bothers me a little bit as to we don't understand what it is. So anyway, before I continue to beat a dead horse, I think it's really interesting that they both spent time in seminary. I like the idea that they both left for similar and different reasons. But for similar but different reasons. Bushwhacker leaves the seminary, not within these issues, but he says that he does. He left the seminary because he had a lot of really evil urges that he couldn't control. And the Punisher left the seminary because he didn't feel that forgiveness should be given to someone who has not also experienced punishment. He couldn't get his mind around that idea, so he dropped it. He just couldn't do it anymore. Which, fair enough, and therefore he becomes a guy known as the Punisher. So I think that's interesting that he's gone from a guy who wanted to punish and forgive to being a guy who just wants to punish without forgiveness. Of course that makes sense. You know, his family's killed. He has a lot of bitterness. He doesn't want to forgive anybody. He just wants to get the scum off the street. And Bushwhacker is a guy that feels that he has a lot of really dark urges. And those urges are, I feel like saying that it's art is a way of forgiving himself for doing what he does. And he knows what he's doing is inherently wrong and that he's sort of lost the way at some point. Because, and also this is a spoiler warning, but at the end of the second issue, at the end of issue 13, there was a really interesting and I feel truthful moment, and I was so just interested by what Carl Potts had to say about Bushwhacker in this scenario. His wife, who is kind of, I don't want to say shrewish, but she's definitely not a nice lady. She is, the Punisher says it best that she aids and abets the activities of this hired assassin that is Bushwhacker, her husband. So, but she's rude to him every day, and in turn, I can't really blame her because he's really rude to her. All he wants from her is dinner to be made, for her to be around, and for her to let him watch CMN. Okay, that's not enough. You're not being a good husband. You're not being a good companion. You're putting... she doesn't have to work fine, but she becomes a captive at that point. And she is completely dissatisfied with it to the point to where she gets in Bushwhacker's face and says a lot of really hurtful things to him. Okay, she even... Bushwhacker has this huge scar on his face, which I'm assuming happened in an earlier issue from some other hero, but or villain or whoever. But that I don't know about. I don't really know much about Bushwhacker other than what I've read within the Punisher continuity. But she says, why don't you get that scar fixed? And she's really snide about it, and or at least that's from the context, that's the way I'm assuming that it's supposed to be read. And she's just so angry, and I can't blame her, but still, these two characters are hard to like. And at some point, the Punisher decides, I'm going to go kill Bushwhacker in his own turf. He let me live, that's his mistake. And so the Punisher seeks out Bushwhacker in his home. Microchip finds the address. And the Punisher says that I'm not going to try to kill or injure his wife, but she knowingly lets Bushwhacker do these things. And at some point she's yelling at the Punisher, and she's saying horrible things to him about how bad of a person he is and how bad of a person her husband is. And Bushwhacker attacks the Punisher and is this close to killing him, and she runs out. She hits him with something. She says she's leaving him, she's never coming back. And now here's the really interesting part. Bushwhacker freaks out. He's in the middle of trying to kill the Punisher. He thinks he's got him on the... Bushwhacker thinks he has the Punisher on the ropes. He has his head underwater, he's choking him. The Punisher really can't do much at this point. He is sort of at the mercy of Bushwhacker. And she runs out, and Bushwhacker freaks. He says, no, don't leave me alone, don't leave me like him. And part of Bushwhacker's, I feel like part of Bushwhacker's whole mentality on this thing is that he's better than his targets for one reason or another. In the case of the Punisher, well, in the case of the artist at the beginning, it's because he doesn't have to use a genetic mutation to be an artist. And in the case of the Punisher, he hasn't let his family run away from him yet. Of course, he's pushing her away, and he doesn't realize it. But the Punisher, it's so sad and so just damaged people and darkness at the end of that issue, that and the emotion that Jim Lee draws in Bushwhacker's face is amazing to me. It's panic, it's fear, it's anger, all in one. It's really pretty solid. I could not. It gives me chills to look at the picture that Jim Lee drew of Bushwhacker, just so scared and looks like he's about to cry, but he's just high on adrenaline because he's trying to kill the Punisher. Really sad. Anyway, I do think these issues are really worth checking out. Willie Worth. I think these issues are really worth checking out. And I do feel that there is this slight contrivance that, oh sure, these people get shoved together because he's an assassin. I feel like there's a contrivance where Dr. Doom and the Kingpin are speaking with each other. I feel like it's sort of a contrivance that, I don't know, I'll admit, I just feel like there's a lot of convenience in this issue, but I really don't care. I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I don't care that they don't really explain how it's art. I would love for them to explain how it's art. In fact, I don't even need it to be in this issue. I would like for Carl Potts to just sit down and write what about murder makes it art, or at least from the perspective of Bushwhacker, what about murder makes it art. That would be satisfying for me. That's where I'm dissatisfied. The contrivance of Dr. Doom and Kingpin, and then the dissatisfaction of Bushwhacker not really going into depth about what makes it art. That's it. That's the long and the short of it. This may have been about 10 minutes longer than it needed to be. So thanks for watching the Comic Vault, guys. As always, I'm Vince. You're watching the Comic Vault on Geekvolution. We'll catch you later.